piloting those ideas, right? And so Pathways gave them an opportunity to have those conversations. And that was pretty interesting to me as an aspect of how we can deal with many of the concerns that we may have. The other component to that, which was the second component, also from that session, was that it is crucial that we focus strongly on actually funding the work that it takes to create the pathways, to create the changes, to provide the funding for the people who are involved in it, because the work is extensive. And it's not going to be just a model that you can implement and keep going with it. So there has to be actual money behind the initiatives, behind the work that you want to do, right? So those two key things were kind of big takeaways. Then the third takeaway for me was really from the keynote speaker, which was Dr. Estela Mara Benzimon from USC. She was really talking a lot about equity. And one of the things that she even stated, which kind of bold considering it was a Pathways conference, right? One of the things she stated was that equity is not inherent within Pathways. And it really isn't. It is a way you can actually have equity initiatives be a part of what you're doing. But a guided pathways model does not necessarily lead to more equitable outcomes if we do not put equity at the forefront of our decision making. And that was the key component, that that has to be at the forefront of what we do as we're deciding on program mapping, as we're deciding on advising, as we're deciding on all the other aspects that guided pathways will really touch on. If we do not have equity as a lens at the beginning, do not expect pathways to provide an equitable outcome. And that was a key takeaway for me, and something that I'm trying to grapple with how it will manifest itself as we start getting much more directly into the weeds of what program mapping is going to look like, and those kind of dynamics. I guess I had a fourth one. The last takeaway was another aspect from that talk, and it's one that actually was brought back to mind now when I saw the icons of the different areas of study, which is the first time I've seen them. And how those are kind of district-wide kind of areas of study, right? One of the key components about equity is giving up power. You have to give up power. You have to be willing to give up power because your power can be exercised upon others. And seeing the areas of studies articulated before I've had a chance to think about what program mapping is going to look like for us is an area where I do not necessarily see power being relinquished at the district level. And so I think that that's something that we need to keep in mind when we're thinking about, are we trying to fit into a box too much, or are we maintaining what we want to do at our local college? And be willing to have that tough conversation of being like, all right, these are the areas of studies. Do not presume these are not going to have effects on us, right? And so I think that's an aspect of equity that we have to keep in mind. Many times we will need to give up power and allow power to be diffused among more entities.
Yes. Can you hear me without this?
Yes,
Just
but
the camera.
You need that. Oh.
We can wait.
Yeah, we can do that. So, well, I think the biggest takeaway from this is that I realized that I'm old. I'm really old. But connected to the event itself, I was already sold on pathways before I went to this event. But one of the things that I came to realize is that this is not going to be just another thing that the college takes on that somebody over in an office is going to deal with and we'll hear about once in a while. This is a massive paradigm shift. And I think that one of the places that shift is going to happen is that, I'll speak for myself as an instructor. So oftentimes I am focused on the students who come into my classroom and I'm going to teach them for the quarter, and then they leave hopefully more knowledgeable than when they came in. Sort of a changed human being, if you will. But any help that they need is somebody else's responsibility. We've got financial aid is somewhere else on campus, and the counselors are somewhere else on campus, and advising is somewhere else on campus. But I think under this model, it's not going to be separate responsibilities, it's going to be shared responsibilities, that we're going to be having to work together much more closely, hand in hand, in order to provide an equitable opportunity for students. And that's another piece that I learned is the difference between equality and equity. I have a strong belief, and I've had a strong belief, that I treat my students with equality. I treat them all equally. But that doesn't necessarily mean they can all succeed equally. Equity means that some people are going to need more from me as an instructor and from us as an institution to be able to succeed. We can't assume all students are equal. And we can't assume that we treat them all equally, we're being fair. Because maybe we're not being fair. Some people, I think it's I saw a picture one time, some people need a bigger box to stand on to see over the fence. And I think Amy was sharing with me yesterday, hopefully one of these days we'll get to a chain link fence and everybody can see through it regardless of how tall they are. But I think that there's a huge paradigm shift that we're going to have to step out of our silos, whether it's our classroom silo, our department, our division, or part of the campus, and be much more interactive, much more cross-functional collaboration. And then the third thing that came through for me is about our systems, the way we do things. We tend to build our systems, whether it's registration or it's our website or anything else that we do on campus, from our point of view as the organization administering that thing, that process, that website. When really we ought to be using this from the point of view of the user of it. What's the experience like for a student attempting to register? What's the experience like for a student attempting to use our webpage? What's the experience of a student attempting to do the mass run between the business office and the financial aid office? And what's their experience of us? And I think it's going to require us to be much more aware of their experience of attending and experiencing us as a college, rather than us saying, we're going to show you this based on our point of view, and then you have to adapt to it. I think it's going to be much more of a looking through the binoculars from the other end. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, panel. What questions do you guys have for the panel or for Pete or myself?
I got a question. Not for me. Thank you for sharing. I'm reminded how valuable it is to hear from the groups that get the opportunity to go off campus and not only reflect but also get new information. Makes me jealous. I wish I would have been able to go. I want to ask about something that touches on what a couple of different people said in slightly different ways. For me, working at South the last 3.5 years, the sense that guided pathways is more than just program mapping and areas of study and all of the bells and whistles that are, the names have changed because they're now part of guided pathways. The institutional cultural change, Bill and I've talked about the leadership management part change of this, the equity focus of this, the cross-functionality focus of this. So I'm curious, in part, to hear some of you, others of you reflect on how what you experience in Spokane and or what you've been talking about here is causing you to see your job a little differently.
Bill, you have a mic in front of you.
if it is causing you to see your job differently.
Okay. I just turned it on. Well, okay, I'll say. So it has, in some ways, and in some ways not too much. You know, I would hope that most of my career I've been student-centered in the classroom, right? Like students being at the forefront of my decision-making. So that aspect of it, I think, was present. But one of the things that I noticed is that within this purview, it is really imperative for my students, but for me as well, to have a much better understanding of different aspects of campus, different aspects of the student's experience. It has been frustrating because it's hard to find that aspect of it. I think that that's one of the things that Pathways really tries to, in a very concerted way, address. And so part of one of the aspects that I've seen very differently is my position on campus. As far as instruction, I pretty much understood that, but as far as what the student sees as my position, a lot of times I am, and often will be, and hopefully in the future will continue to be the person that they can start a conversation with on campus, and then have that conversation be actually coherent, as opposed to what I've now reflecting on it. I can be the start of a conversation, but then my knowledge ran into very quick limits. Or what I put forward was not necessarily what advising would actually want, or what somebody else would want. And so having that much more cross-campus component is something that I'm seeing as it's actually a necessity of my job, not just a benefit that I could have for my students.
Part of your question was, did that change the way that I teach?
Oh, the way that you do your job.
The way that I do my job? Well, I have two examples of how it's already impacted me. One is, I was teaching in my statistics class. I was teaching a situation where it was a binomial, male and female. And I went through and I was counting the students, and I'm going, oh, so how many students do we have here, how many male? And I went through and I started counting them, and I stopped. And I suddenly said to them, okay, I want you to know that I'm counting male and female from my perception of what I think you are, rather than how you identify yourself. And I stated that in the classroom. And after class, a student came up to me and said, I want to thank you for saying that, because I identify myself differently than I appear. And that's one thing that occurred. Another one that occurred is that I have a student in my class who's a vet, and he's suffering from PTSD. And I went up to him and I said, after class, and I said to him something that I probably wouldn't have done before, and that was, how are you doing with this material? And what do you need from me to help you understand this? And it was looking at it from his point of view as a learner and saying, what can I do for you as a learner to help you who's suffering from this condition to be able to, and I would have treated him the same as everybody else. I talked about equity and equality, and I would have treated him thinking to myself, well, here's a vet, and here's a female, and here's a transgender, and I'll treat them all the same. But I realized, no, I need to talk to him about his situation. And so it's impacted me just in how I perform my daily operations. Okay?
I have
Oh, go for it. No.
jumped in. So for me, I think it doesn't change the level of passion that everyone on campus has. No doubt everyone's here because we choose to be here, and I don't think Seattle Pathways is changing the amount of passion we all have, but how we focus it and how we're able to work across campus with each other, all with that kind of group passion that we have. From an advising standpoint, I've heard a lot of different conversations around thinking of our advising appointments not as just academic planning and this is what you have to do to register, but instead thinking of it as more of a coaching experience. So coaching a student through some of their struggles with classes. Maybe if a student comes to us with an issue with a particular class, it's not us saying, okay, we see that you're struggling, but you have to go to that instructor and talk to them. It's yes, you need to go to that instructor and talk to them, and we should also get you connected to counseling, and we should get you connected to tutoring or the library. So really just expanding all of the resources that we already have on campus and making it kind of more of our everyday conversations with students. Yeah, so I kind of think it's really just reframing how we work with our students. We're already doing really great work, but how can we elevate that to the next level? Take it away.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add from what Bill stated, and a little bit also to what you stated. That's an example of what I was talking about of relinquishing power. In the classroom, I have seen that on myself too, being more flexible, being more willing to allow the circumstances, the experiences, the actual complete holistic human that is that student in front of me to then help guide some of the, guide, I use the word, but help guide some of my decision making and really allowing that diffusion of that power beyond, to some limits, but beyond what we would normally hold as, no, a deadline is a deadline. Well, yeah, but no, it's not. Like, there's many times where a student has very good reasons for missing that deadline, and a little flexibility can go a long way. And so that aspect of relinquishing power happens in the classroom, happens in many, many places. And I think that that's something that we need to embrace more if we want to start having equity be really at the forefront of our decision making.
Nice, thank you.
I don't feel that I really have anything more to add. I'm sure I could come up with something. I'm pretty creative. But I'm wondering if we wouldn't maybe be better served with another question.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah.
So, I'm Curtis, I know you all, I think. Thanks for going to this, and thanks for thinking deeply about this and all of that. I guess my question is, we have a lot of part-time faculty and a lot of part-time students, and a lot of them go to class at night when there's not a lot of services. And you guys are all full-time employees who can kind of impact things. You're also faculty, and you're also advisors and librarians, and so sometimes they listen to you, that is your colleagues, more than they listen to me as a dean. But I'm wondering how we get some of these ideas you're talking about to the part-time faculty and the part-time students who may come in, they see their teacher, they get back in the car, and away they go again. It seems like that's going to be a real tough place to make some of these changes that we really need to make, and those situations maybe seem like the most important ones.
I don't know, do we have any part-time instructors in the audience? Okay, so it seems to me, first of all, doing something like this is a good first step, but then we need to take this to our division meetings where we've got the part-timers as a captive audience. And I'll say sell them on that. That sounds so negative. What I mean is provide them the information, provide them the positive outcomes that will come from guided pathways. And then from there, hopefully they will take it to the classroom and will be the initial point of information to part-time students. That's my initial thought.
One thing I would say is that the part-time nature of our student population is very much on our radar. It's been in every conversation I've been a part of. It's we're looking at the data and we know who our students are, and so that piece is definitely there. I don't feel like we've had a really substantial conversation yet about the part-time faculty aspect, and I feel like that's a really important one. So thank you for bringing it up, and I will certainly, as a part of the team, I will be happy to continue bringing up that piece. I think ideally you get a part-timer into the leadership team or some role that allows for that voice, or recognizes what the constraints are of part-time faculty to be parts of these kinds of conversations. The other thing I wanted to mention is that, yes, about the timing of services. I certainly can't speak to all the aspects of that, but I will say that one way in which I feel like we're aware of and sensitive to the needs of working students is scheduling of classes. For example, both of the classes I teach for the bachelor's programs are taught after 5 p.m. And we're pushing them later and later to make it easier for students to come to them. So I think that is to some extent on the radar.
Just to echo what Jim had said, I was thinking the same thing about, well, I can go back to my, to the part-time instructors in my department, in my division, and try to reach out to them, maybe casually at first, and let them know that some emails might be coming if they're interested in weighing in, or at least so they can see what's going on, and just let them know. Apologize in advance if I send too many. And we do have some full-time instructors who do teach some of the courses at night, and maybe something I wrote down myself is to remember those instructors maybe when we're starting to do more work on all of this, and to reach out to them and say, hey, can you speak with these people if you see them, if it's appropriate. Also, I believe I remember from last week's meeting with regard to the part-time students, that the pathway, at least one of the pathways is being set up from the part-time perspective.
We're
correct?
all
All of them. Yeah, I knew there was at least one. Yeah, so that came to mind, but obviously they would speak to that better.
Go ahead.
Just a quick note, I mean, this is the kind of thing that Seattle Pathways has brought up, a lot of these challenging questions that are making us think, how are we best serving our students and our faculty, or the campus as a whole. So thank you for bringing that up, because those are one of the many hard questions that we have to ask ourselves through this process. So, thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Aaron. I do have the mic. Beyond that too, I am part of the Faculty Academy, and we do a kind of start of the quarter orientation and then ongoing training. Jenny Wilson has been really active as the faculty development coordinator in that process, and in getting the key component there, which is funding for the people that participate, and Pete has been very supportive of that. And so that's one of the ways for part-time faculty that, or one of the arenas where we can kind of reach part-time faculty on some of these ideas, and more importantly, listen to what the obstacles and the concerns are. That component of it, I think, will be one that will be extremely challenging in the first 2 or 3 years of Pathways, because it's the period where you're really in flux. Things aren't set. We are creating program maps. It's really hard to talk about program maps until they're created, right? It's really hard to do these sort of aligning of conversation and discourse and language around all the things that we'll be doing with Pathways until that's really created and solidified. So in the next 3 years, that will be really tough work. And it'll be work that has to be very fluid, has to be very nimble and flexible, especially for our part-time students and our part-time faculty, but to be able to get that information to them.
I'm noticing the clock, are we doing on time?
Well, we're over time. but,
We're over.
I mean,
Okay,
it's
then-
however long
then
people want to
I'll
stay.
put a period at the end of the sentence.
There you go.
Perfect.
Okay, so before I became full-time faculty, I was part-time faculty for over 13 years. And I'm aware that of the students that we have, what is 70% or so are part-time?
73.
73%, 0.7. Honestly, this is a question that I have wrestled with as an instructor, as a coordinator for a program. How do we take a 2-year program where they're taking 3 classes a quarter, and how do we fit in 2 classes a quarter and make it fit in the schedule and make sure that those sections still run when we're under budget pressure, all those things. My honest answer is, I have no idea how we're going to address this. I'm hearing from everyone here, and it's certainly true for me, that we're considering the experience of both part-time faculty and part-time students. But as Chris said here, it's going to be a challenge, and we're going to have to find ways to, I think the best way to put it is pull them into the community and give both part-time faculty and part-time students a sense of belonging to this community, and that the pathway, when we talk about a pathway, a guided pathway, it's not just listing a bunch of classes and you take them in this order. It's also, how do we help you become a part of this community so that we are collectively together, you the student, me the faculty, you the part-timer, me the full-time, together creating a community of success where we can move students through the system in a way that we can feel successful, that we've helped someone, and they can feel successful, that they have a chance at whatever future they've decided for themselves.
On that note,
Yeah?
thank you.
Period.
Mike.
Period.
I always feel like it's still
That's
equipment.
it?
like
We're
we should-
done?
Yeah?
Are we done?
Yes, thank you.
So